When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice. It is me. It is Walter. We're here. It is time. And guess what? We have a guest. We're going to have a call in. It is our buddy Shane McMurdo. Yep, that's right. From the live cast, from all the other episodes, he's here. We are talking the draft, but not 2020, 2021. What? Why? Because we can and we will and we shall. And so let me welcome him up onto the show. You can follow him at the THEE_Shane_MCM. And let's bring him on right now.
What's up? What's up, man? How you doing? Chilling?
Talking about 2021 prospects. Some of these guys I'm interested if they actually show up in the supplemental draft because they go, wait a second, we might not even play next year, so you might as well go ahead and do the supplemental draft and maybe go on and start our career a year early.
Yeah, because the rule is you have to be 3 years removed from your high school graduation.
Yeah, so
that's it.
So I think guys like, Travis Etienne, we're probably going to talk about, like a guy who probably could have came out this year. He'd be one to maybe do the supplemental draft. Alex Leatherwood, I think, still could have came out this year. I remember rumors of him coming out. He's of Alabama. He probably could have came out this year. He decided to stay. So guys that probably stayed this year and thought they were going to go an extra year in college, I think they're probably more likely to maybe do the supplemental draft if they think that there's no college season this year anyway.
Right.
And that would actually give like teams like a real benefit out of that too, like because it's like, okay, like some of the teams that have extra picks next year would be like, oh, you know what, we can get this really good guy for like a day 2 pick or a day 3 pick. Like, for instance, if you're the Miami Dolphins and you whiffed at tackle and then Alex Leatherwood comes out and you throw out a second or third round pick on the guy, you probably have a better offensive line now than you did before.
Or if Cincinnati, like if Burrow performs well, but they have problems keeping him upright.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very likely possibility, but
I'm shocked they didn't go harder at O-line. That was the one thing that I thought was shocking, and I felt like the receiver pick was a little interesting for him. I didn't think Higgins was going to be the guy there. I just felt like it's a lot of the same build for their receiving core.
Yeah, they're just building from the outside in, really. A lot of possession receivers, decent route runners, minus the one speed guy.
Well, that's the thing. It depends on if they even keep John Ross. Like, how much longer are you going to keep him on the roster? Would you maybe trade him? Is he going to be a reclamation project? Are they going to, take his fifth-year option?
Did they pick up his fifth-year option at all?
I don't think they've announced him yet. I know they announced a few different people. I know Tack McKinley was the only one I heard that absolutely is not getting it. So that's another Atlanta guy not staying on the roster. They've been pretty bad at drafting the last few years.
Yeah, they've had a rough go of it for sure. Well, they're better than Jacksonville. If you think about it, like, look at all, like, Jacksonville has been such an awful franchise that they've had so many top 5 draft picks. Bortles is gone. Ramsey is gone.
But Ramsey was good. At least Ramsey was good. Miles Jack is good. Leonard Fournette's really the big question mark, but, like, Josh Allen's good. They hit on Yannick Ngakoue. I would argue that Jacksonville's a better drafter than Atlanta.
They are, but, like, none of these guys stay there.
Well, that's
they
the
draft
question.
Well, but they don't keep them there. Ramsey's gone. Fournette might get traded. Bortles is gone. Justin Blackman isn't even in the league anymore. All of these just wild picks, man.
Yeah, and then also how much is the 2021 college season is going to affect next year's draft. And if honestly, some teams are trading away picks for next year, but if you only get like a 6-game snapshot, you might have been better off taking a guy this year than next year.
Well, yeah, but that the season is mainly to see for people who are fringe. Like there's guys in this list of names we're about to talk about that would have gone early this year. It's the fringe guys that round 1 and maybe half of round 2 are pretty much like you pretty much got these locks. It's everybody else. Like, well, can they adjust to a new coach? Can they show up in big games? Can he play a full season without getting injured? Like guys like that you're worried about.
Yeah.
Like it's just there's so much that can change in a football season anyway. Like on the NFL side, team needs, cuts, trades, injuries, underperforming players that really drive up what players you need. And then on the college side, it's people who underperform, people who get hurt, people who come, like a year ago today, Joe Burrow was considered like a 6th-round draft pick if he got drafted at all.
Yeah. No, it was kind of a shocker that he came out of nowhere. And that's what the I guess the value of another season kind of gets you is, oh, you have that opportunity to see a guy play, another 10 games, maybe potentially a bowl game.
Right. And like Dylan Moses, like
Mhm.
we'll talk about him. Like he would have been a first-round draft pick this year if he played, but he got hurt, so he's coming back for his senior year. So it's just things like that. Like it'll be weird, it'll be kind of shitty, but I don't think it would like ruin a draft necessarily.
No,
Especially because there's a lot of talent in it.
at least the benefit would be is they'd have the option of hopefully by that point working out the players, like being able to get them to do a pro day or do private workouts, not just do the Skype, interviews that they were doing already or the FaceTime interviews.
Right.
So at least they get that benefit. So it might be a bit of a trade-off either way. You get some game tape. But let's talk about some guys. Let's talk quarterbacks, right? There's next year's supposed to be the big tank for Trevor Lawrence or tank for Justin Fields draft. What do you think about those two?
Well, we've been talking about Lawrence since he was a true freshman because he was a five-star recruit, went to Clemson, comes in for Kelly Bryant, and just goes off. He's got size. He's got not just like a strong arm, but he's accurate with it. He's a good decision maker. And then this year he showed off a little bit more of his athleticism.
Yeah, he did run the ball more.
He did. And he's shown up in big games. Like you can't not like he's only played 2 seasons and he's been to the championship both times. Now, granted, in the championship against LSU, he didn't have his finest performance, but that, LSU had a player at every position get drafted this year for a reason. They were a very good team and very well coached, but he didn't absolutely embarrass himself. He didn't have like a Rich Gannon Super Bowl appearance. He still had a solid showing for himself. He just, like a lot of people, like, AJ Terrell got drafted 16th overall and he got embarrassed in that game. Etienne had a quiet second. Etienne and Higgins both had good first halves, but they kind of just disappeared the second half.
Yeah, I think if you just even looked at that secondary, which was Fulton, Delpit, and then Stingley, he's not even going to be eligible next year, I don't even think. Stingley's going to probably be a top 5 pick when he comes out.
Oh, yeah. And so will another guy on their team we'll get to later on the other side. But yeah, he's Lawrence is undoubtedly still the number 1 going in, although I think by the time the draft comes, Justin Fields will be a little bit closer. Like, this kid is quietly, if Joe Burrow didn't have the best statistical college season we've ever seen, like, more people would be talking about Fields because he had a great season as well. He threw for over 40 touchdowns compared to 4 interceptions, rushed for between 400 and 500 as well. And he's big. He's like he's only like 6'3", but he's like 250. And he's fast. And he transferred from Georgia because he wasn't going to start over from there, and a couple other things like hate speech things directed his way while he was there, which is how he was able to get immediate eligibility at Ohio State. But he's fast, he's athletic, strong arm, but he's a good passer too. Like, because you've seen a lot of quarterbacks come from Ohio State that have good like statistical numbers, but when they get to the NFL, they're not good at passers. Cardell Jones, Braxton Miller, Terrell Pryor, possibly Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of people are going to make the Dwayne Haskins, comparison. Now, granted, they changed coaches. Urban Meyer's not leading the program there anymore. No. So that might be the big difference makers. Maybe, you get to see more downfield passing from Justin Fields. They seem to be using a lot more running backs and pass protection and going for deeper, shots downfield than just running those crossing routes all the time.
Haskins was more of a touch thrower anyway.
Yeah.
Fields has a strong arm. He can throw in tighter windows. He goes through his reads way better than Haskins ever did. He's more of like he's better at like anticipatory throws too. because one thing people love to hold against him was in the college semifinal against Clemson when he threw that game-losing interception at the end of the game. If you look at it, the wide receiver made the wrong break.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those routes where, like, depending on what the corner does, like if he stays over the top, you break it on the inside. If he bites, you break it to the outside. And the corner bit, but the receiver didn't know that, so he went to the inside when Fields threw it to the outside, and that's why it was very easy for Tanner Muse to intercept. But Fields made the right read. So you got to remember, there's like less than 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. They were down, and he still had the wherewithal and the composure to make the right decision for what the play called for in a big stage. Even though the ball got intercepted, he still did what he had to do.
So my question is these guys going to be the top two guys next year? Or is there maybe like another player that might eke in, right? Like this year we had Chase Young. Everybody's talking about Chase Young maybe being, number one. Last year people were talking about Joey Bosa. Like, is there going to be that other player like Jamar Chase, the receiver out of LSU, I think probably who you were alluding to before as being a future first rounder?
I'll say that they'll be the first two quarterbacks taken, but like, it all depends who's drafting at 1 and 2. Because like if they have a quarterback situation lined up, but they need other things, then But I'll say they're the first two quarterbacks taken. But if anybody could supplant them the way you were talking about, I have two guys that come to mind right away. Penei Sewell, the tackle out of Oregon, and Gregory Rousseau, defensive end out of Miami.
Yeah, Miami's got a couple of guys coming out next year that people are very interested in, but Rousseau is definitely the one that's high on everybody's board.
He's a freak, man.
And I think if you're going to get like an option at getting a top-end pass rusher, that's definitely where you're going to go, because that seems the top-end picks usually usually quarterback, pass rusher. This year we saw Okudah go top 3, and then offensive line. So Penei Sewell. I mean, people were talking about him, being very high up if he had been eligible to come out. I saw somebody say that he's been their highest rated tackle since Ronnie Staley. So,
oh wow!
So you're talking about like in 5 years, that's their highest rated tackle, which is weird because I remember people I know some people didn't have Ronnie Staley, but I guess that was his guy that draft. I know Laramie Tunsil was, I think, for at least some of the general public, was the big tackle in that draft. But either way, you're talking about maybe in 5 years the highest rated tackle in a draft. So that's high praise.
He's a freak, man. He really is, and he's because the biggest hit that Oregon gets on offense usually when it comes from college to the draft is they have great athletic players but not great football players. Like when it comes to offense. But he's like a legit offensive tackle. Like this kid could play at any university he wanted to, and he would still be getting the same amount of praise, if not more.
So when Washington picks in the top 3 next year, they're going to probably take him?
If they were smart, yeah.
Or they'll take the other Ohio State quarterback and double up.
Yeah, who knows with them? Who knows? But yeah, and Rousseau, I'm just such a big. He's fast, he's tall, and he's long. Really good at like getting around guys to where the length comes in is the longer you are, the quicker you can get to the quarterback. That's why Joe Walsh drafted Charles Haley, was because his arms were so long. He was able to get to the quarterback much quicker. That's why length is so big for defensive end. Mm-hmm. Fast, strong, tall. Like he's just. This might be a hot take, but I would definitely take him over. Like if he were in the draft this year, I wouldn't take him over Young, but I would definitely take him over Chason.
I don't think that's that much of a hot take, only because Chason did not have a lot of production when he was at LSU. Like again, it was always kind of the argument of who should be the second like pass rusher in this draft, and it was between Epinesa and Chason. But I mean, at least gives you an idea. So you at least right now think he should be a first round pick. I know some people who I kind of follow had said that he doesn't have maybe the true the techniques down, but again, like athletic if he develops into his body, he starts developing some pass rush moves, he gets within a good coaching staff, he's going to be an elite player.
Well, he's got a good bend, and he's quick off the line, so he can develop a bull rush as well because he's quick and strong. He's got a very good bend and very good tracking skills. Okay, different positions, but like this is how high I am on him. I would take him over Brown, who went 7th overall to the Carolina Panthers, who the number 1 defensive tackle of this year's draft.
Out of Auburn.
That's how high I am on Rousseau.
Where would you have taken if you were drafting this year? Where did you have Derek Brown on your board? Kind of, if you had a personal board, would you have taken him like where he went, or would you have felt like he should have been further down?
Well,
or did you even have him as DT1? Because I know some people had Kinlaw DT1.
Yeah, I had him as DT1. Technique-wise and skill-wise, they were pretty even.
Mm-hmm.
But Brown just showed out a little more and played in more big games, obviously, than South Carolina did, and he didn't have the injury concern.
Yeah, I felt like Derek Brown was maybe the safer one. I felt like Kinlaw maybe had the higher ceiling. He showed a little bit more ability for pass rush than necessarily Derek Brown did, but Derek Brown was just like I felt like the safest stock you could probably have bought at that point. So I get why teams liked him. What other positions are you interested in next year? Because like again, there's like this year was a great receiving class. Like we already talked about one offensive tackle. I know a couple of offensive linemen that are coming out next year or potentially coming out next year.
Yeah, I could see 5 potential offensive tackles going in the first round next year because it's always a position of need. It's always a position you want to improve on, and they're just getting bigger and more athletic at that position as well. And there's a few I see coming out next year.
Yeah, so like you mentioned Sewell, I one guy who everybody thought was going to come out, but maybe was going to be, I think he was mixed on a lot of people's boards, was Alex Leatherwood, which is out of Alabama, who is Jedrick Will's running mate. I think you mentioned the other night on the podcast. I didn't even realize when we were doing the live stream, I didn't realize that's who you were talking about because I had watched him earlier on, and I thought he was going to be coming out this year. But he's a very good pass blocker. I was actually shocked he didn't come out because again he was being talked about as potentially a first round pick this year.
Yeah, I don't know why he didn't.
My one thing is maybe it's just developmental time. Some guys, and then not only that, Saban tricks guys to stay there for so long.
Oh yeah.
Like the one, okay, so we were talking about ETN earlier for guys who might come out in a supplemental draft. One guy who I was thinking of who probably should have came out because the running back was Najee Harris. Like, why the heck did that guy stay? Like, does he really think he's going to upgrade his value?
Right, and not just that too, but another running back that people might think in the first is Chuba Hubbard.
Yes, and that was another guy who could have came out this year too.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised he didn't because you know what? Everyone's going to talk about him when he does come out to the draft. Good player, huge workload.
Yep.
Like they're putting a lot of tread on his tires, and like he would have gone in the first 2 rounds potentially. He definitely would have been a day 1, early day 2 guy if he came out. By him staying, unless because
I definitely think he would have been day 2
last year.
What's up?
Because this was such a stacked draft at other positions at running backs. There's a reason only one running back got drafted in the first round, but he rushed for over 2,000 yards last year. He had a lot of carries, man, and like that's 2 years in a row that he's had a lot of carries, and a third one on tap. It's like, ugh.
I mean, that was the knock on Jonathan Taylor.
Right, that fumbling, but yeah, that's a huge knock.
And then maybe he would because you saw some teams that maybe didn't go for a running back or could have maybe waited even better, waited longer on running back. I thought ETN should have came out because I thought ETN was going to be, again he was fast, man. ETN might be the guy who would have, ran probably faster than Jonathan Taylor. He would have been the one running back to pull it off, or one of the few of the top end guys.
I think he's coming back because Trevor has to come back. And not like if they won that national title against LSU, he would have declared. I think not winning it and having Trevor Lawrence come back was a big reason. Like just that wanting to get redemption and leave as a champion was part of why he stayed. Because developmentally and skill wise, he definitely would have been picked day 2 of this draft. Because he's also such a great pass catcher too. as a running back. But I think the other factors I mentioned are why he stayed.
Yeah, and there's sometimes that unity of everybody going out at the same time. Like we saw that last year with the Clemson D line. There was like 4 guys that all left at the exact same time, and it was kind of like a uniform, like unity thing. So
Right.
you saw what's his name? The one that the Oakland Raiders took at 4 last year.
Farrell.
Yeah, Farrell, Dexter
Wilkins.
Lawrence. You saw like 3 or 4 of them all go together into the draft. So there might be that little bit of like, hey, we're all gonna go and we're gonna go together kind of deal. But then we see guys who are also part of those teams that don't stay. Like T. Higgins left from Clemson this year.
Right. Well, and then this year it's going to be Trevor, Travis Etienne, and Ross as well, the wide receiver. They're all going to get drafted in the first round potentially.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to bring up because it looks like it's going to be a stacked receiver class next year. Like again, not as deep like you were saying, but like it seems like it's going to be like a really good class, like kind of like 2014 class where there's a bunch of really good picks in the top, like in the first round.
Oh yeah. Like Chase and Ross are 1-2 on my board.
Yeah, Justin Ross out of Clemson and Jamar Chase out of LSU. Jamar Chase is just a beast. Like again, like he literally destroyed other people's careers going into the NFL. Their defensive backs were like, I played 1 game against Jamar Chase. He made me look stupid, but still got taken in the first round.
Yeah, AJ Terrell. If you bring up AJ Terrell, everybody says, "Well, did you see what happened in the national title game?" Or even Diggs. People say, "Oh, but did you see what Chase did to him?" Like, he's so good. He
might be that guy that people are going to trade up for. Like eventually, he will be that one guy.
And then that's insane too. Like I don't know if anybody would trade up for a receiver in this class unless they really, really needed one.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they were to, I would say it would be him.
What's your thoughts on Ross? Because you brought him up. He seems to be one of your favorites.
He's not one of my favorites. I just think he's good. He's fast. He's a better route runner than Higgins was. He's not as good as after the catch as Higgins was, but he was definitely a way better route runner. I think better hands. The only thing that like always worries me about receivers is, who's throwing them the ball, right?
Yeah.
Just like it was the exact opposite for Tua, because everybody's knock on Tua was like, well, look who he has the ball to throw to. But with the receivers, sometimes it's like, well, who's throwing them the ball? So is Lawrence making it better? But like it's still up to him to catch it and what to do with the ball after he catches it, which is why I think Ross is way better than Higgins was going like NFL wise.
See, I never felt like a good quarterback made it can maybe make you look a little bit better, but I always like a good quarterback just makes a good receiver like show, right? Like it's like you can't be a good receiver. Like you'll see a lot of good receivers have bad quarterbacks, and that's really it's almost kind of like you were saying before. It's the opposite almost. It's like the inverse. They had a really bad quarterback, so their career gets destroyed. Like
unless
then
you're DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, like you're going ahead and you're having to reach for balls that are totally off your frame. There were a lot of guys in this year's draft that had that issue.
There's a bunch.
And it makes it hard to evaluate. Although sometimes the good thing is you're getting to see them go up and play with an inaccurate quarterback, so you're seeing them lay out for catches. You're getting to see, are they good at catching away from their body? How are they catching the ball? Are they catching, with their fingertips? Or, are they using a little bit, are they not using the right form with catching?
That's why my next 2 guys, Smith and Waddle, they're not going to have Tua this year. But the argument I always make is you see every position come out of Alabama and have success except quarterback. Yeah. So, like, you can't really hold that. Like, if whoever it is throwing the ball to him next year, they're still going to be, Smith and Waddle both first round, at latest second round 2 picks, unless they, like, get hurt or something. But I have a couple other guys. I like Moore from Purdue a lot, even though he's kind of smaller. Mm-hmm. I like St. Brown from USC, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then this might be a little biased because of the position I'm in. But I think a guy that like, especially with the Senior Bowl, if he has a good season, that could creep into a lot of draft boards is Frank Darby out of Arizona State.
You're not the first person I heard mention that, though. There are a lot of people on Twitter who are like, Darby's going to get his opportunity to shine now without Brandon Ayuk there, without N'Keal Harry. Now he's going to be the star guy of that receiving core.
Yeah, and he shined a lot last year. He had 2 deep ball touchdowns against Oregon. He showed out against USC. He had a very, very good, like a lot of people considered him wide receiver 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Ayuk was the more refined route runner. Darby's just a freak athlete.
And then Brandon Ayuk was able to actually come out this year too.
Yeah. But Frank Darby he's a very good receiver.
Do you think it's going to be a similar, like, because we were talking before about Corona, do you think it's going to be like how it was this year, where it seemed like a lot of the bigger school prospects kind of got taken up? You saw the LSUs, the Ohio States. Like, yeah, there were a couple of small school prospects here and there, usually the ones that Bill Belichick likes to frequent. But, like, yeah. it was a very big school Power 5 draft, it seemed like. Like, do you think it's going to probably be that way next year, too? Even though, yeah, usually the Power 5 usually, like, dominate. I felt even more like that this year.
Well, it all depends what happens, because it was definitely this year because, one, a lot of them didn't attend the combine.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get pro days, anything like that. So you really had to narrow down to the safest pick. Like, well, you know what? We've seen this guy against top competition. We've seen this guy in bigger games. We're more familiar with his coaching staff, especially because Mayock and Gruden, for example, like they took Arnett at 19th.
Yeah.
But they love their big school guys, especially Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama. They love those 3 schools, which most teams do. So you get more of a sample size on them because, I'm sure that John Gruden knows Dabo Swinney a lot more than he does whoever the coach of Lenore Ryan is. You know what I'm saying? Where Kyle Duggar came out of. So it's just one of those things. So it all depends. Like if they don't have those things taken away from them this year, like, the pro days and things like that. And then I think it might be more return to the norm, but I mean, it just remains to be seen depending on, the status of the whole country.
It's true. By the way, so this year it was a bad draft class for tight ends, right? Like, who's the first tight end taken? Cole Kmet? Yeah, you went, like, the Chicago Bears took him. One thing I've noticed, it sounds like next year's draft class might be a little bit better for tight ends, at least on the top end. I know Kyler Pitts in Florida, this name's going to be horrible. Pat Freiermuth, Brendan Jordan. Freiermuth is out of Penn State. Brevin Jordan's out of Miami.
Jordwin, yeah. Jordwin's weird, too, to say.
That's the problem with football in general. Is you get guys who have like these weirdly spelt names, and then like Tyrod was like, oh no, it's Tyrod now. Like, that was weird when that happened. I wonder if he's still doing that or if he went back to Tyrod.
I was listening to. So, do you ever listen to the podcast Two Bears One Cave, the one that Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer do together?
Yeah, every once in a while.
Tom Segura was telling a story. He was doing an interview with T.O.
Yeah,
and his agent was there first, and they're like, his name's Terrell. If you call him Terrell, he won't talk to you. And he's like, okay. And then one of Segura's assistants was like, oh, I'm going to go ask him for an autograph. And Segura's like, who? And he's like, Terrell Owens. He's like, it's Terrell. And he's like, no, it's not. He's like, yeah, it is. Call him Terrell, not Terrell. And he's like, I'm not doing that. And he's like, well, then just call him T.O. And he's like, dude, his name's Terrell Owens. So he goes up. He's like, hey, Terrell, can I get an autograph? And T.O. just walked away from him. My whole life, I've been calling him Terrell Owens. I had no idea it was Terrell.
That's kind of crazy, man.
And it feels weird to say Terrell Owens. Like, I've never done that.
Yeah, it doesn't even sound comfortable to say. Like, it's like, it sounds like you're saying terrible Owens. It's just, yeah, it just doesn't, like, fit.
Well, another guy, Stearns as well at tight end. I don't know if you have him on your list or not.
No, I don't. So yeah, that's another good one. Yeah,
I can't remember the school he's from. Go ahead, I'm still here.
Tight ends, like, again, it's a weird position. It takes a lot of time to adapt. is it that maybe we're just like last year? This year's class was also kind of not very heavy for it, but also like the last couple of years, it's like been. I don't know.
Well,
I don't think there's a lot of value for some of them unless they see like, well, what was it last year? We saw somebody go in the top 10. We saw 2 first-rounders last year, both from Iowa. So unless they go to Iowa, is there an Iowa tight end this year?
No.
Damn it! There's no Iowa
Yeah,
tight
'cause you
ends.
Kittle, Fant, and Hawkinson, but Fant and Hawkinson both went in the top 20 last year.
Yeah.
But other than like a game or two, neither one of them, I would say, had great seasons because tight end is a much more historically. It takes much longer to adapt to the program at tight end than anywhere else.
So that kind of brings up the question of why even draft a tight end in the first round at that point. Like, because if it takes long to develop them and you're paying them on their second contract, A, you might get somebody in free agency, and B, like, okay, maybe take them in later rounds and maybe take shots on them. Because that's how we saw George Kittle and Travis Kelce. You know, even Gronk was a second-round pick. Like, we've seen a couple of first-rounders be decent, but first round at tight ends is not really a real sure hit rate, it seems like. Now, it's kind of more of a more what's it called? More colloquial. It's not like it doesn't seem like a real statistic, if you will. But
it's not. But I would never use a first round pick on a tight end unless they were an absolute insane, like once in a generation talent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you. I would never. I would not have drafted T.J. Hawkinson in the top 10 last year.
Well, then you also look at the contract for tight ends is relatively cheap. Like, you look at, like, Austin Hooper is the highest paid tight end, and he's making $8 million less than Amari Cooper. So, you know, even like when Gronk was playing in the NFL, his contract was less than what Hooper's is now, and he was definitely more impactful to his team. So it just feels
like Hooper really didn't come into his own until the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. There's even more O linemen, man. There's Creed Humphrey. There's Samuel Cosme. There's Trey Smith out of Tennessee. I know he had an injury, which kind of why he went back. The O-line classes the last couple of years, it looks like everybody was complaining about O-line. So then they went, yeah, we got to actually find some good offensive linemen. And they started putting them out there. Like, guys started going ahead and actually doing well at those positions, it seems like. Or they're getting better at scouting them as well, it seems like, too.
Well, and then you mentioned Smith, but his teammate Mays, they both can play tackle or guard, and that's going to help their draft stock a lot because they're a very good plug and play players, but they're also good at both. Did you mention Cosme at all?
Yeah, the Texas offensive tackle.
What about Mayfield?
I didn't mention him.
He's I keep forgetting these schools.
And then
Michigan. He's a tackle out of Michigan. Very good. Jalen Mayfield.
This is the problem. Michigan's program, like, yeah, they have a lot of good guys that come out, but it's like, I don't know, man. Is Harbaugh going to be there much longer? It just doesn't seem like that program's working with him.
Well, they recruit well. They get a lot of pro talent well. It's a lot like when Les Miles was at LSU. Always recruited well, always had good draft talent, but just never put it on the field. And even with Urban Meyer gone, they still can't beat Ohio State. And you got other programs coming up, like Wisconsin's perennially like a top 4 team in that conference, but then Penn State has been slowly but surely coming up. And then Minnesota with Coach PJ Fleck, they're a big come up. Oh, that's a wide receiver we forgot to mention was Bateman out of Minnesota. Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota.
Yeah, I have him somewhere on my list. But I think it was at the lower end of it. I have him down by Rondale Moore. So yeah,
he's good, man. I could see him creeping up.
D-line looks like it's going to be a bit better next year with Marvin Wilson coming out.
Florida State.
Yeah, Tyler Shelvin, another LSU guy. Dude, LSU like this year and it seems like next year as well. just keeps on, it's pumping out more guys than it felt like it was for a bit. It felt like LSU was mostly defensive backs for a while, and then a couple of receivers every few years. But
I
next
like
year looks
Ray
like
out of Alabama because he's a defensive tackle, but he's a good pass rushing defensive tackle.
And then Dylan Moses, you mentioned Dylan Moses, right? Where he was, he had the injury. Was that the one you
Yeah,
said?
he tore his ACL. And he was going to come into this draft. He didn't decide until mid-January what he was going to do. He decided like a week.
Oh, I remember that because it was he had posted something about not declaring, because and then his dad had posted some kind of letter because I guess his dad's an attorney, and he said he's not allowed to make that statement, and he wrote this very oddly like funny weird like written lawyer letter that wasn't like it was very oddly written, and basically it was because of the insurance, because some of these guys when they're coming out they if they're going back to school for a year and they're rated at a certain level in the draft, they get an insurance policy. But the more and more I've learned about these insurance policies, they're not sure things. They're not like actually one of the few times I ever had a conversation with a real NFL draft analyst. Lance Zerline and I had this conversation on Twitter where we went back and forth about these insurance policies, about whether they're really risk worthy or not, like whether that should be the thing that's keeping you in school. And he seemed to be very much for them. And I know me and a couple of other people were like, I don't know, man, because like again, you have to insurance companies. They're not just handing you money. That's the problem with insurance companies. They make money through denying the claim. So a lot of these, some people have made their money on them, but there was a story going back. I forget who it was that came out in the draft. It was a guy who went to Tennessee. I think it was Chance Warmack, actually. When he came out, he had taken out an insurance policy, and he had to fight them on it. So it happens every once in a while where you get these policies where some of these guys end up falling in the draft, because you also have to prove that it was because of your injury that you fell in the draft and not for some kind of personal reason.
Well, because like Ifo Ekpreolamu, former defensive back for Oregon, decided to stay for his senior year, even though he was projected to be a first-round draft pick. And then his senior year, Oregon makes it to the college football playoff. And during practice for the Florida State game for the Rose Bowl, he tears his ACL and then doesn't get drafted until the 7th round by your Cleveland Browns. But his ACL injury was so devastating, he never really could perform at the pro level, and he actually got his insurance.
That might be one of those things where it clearly shows, because again, it happened right before. But then again, you're taking the risk of, like, for instance, a guy like Reuben Foster, right? Guy who was projected to be a top 10 pick, didn't have devastating injuries, but they might have contributed to his fall in his draft stock. But he also had off the field question marks as well. That's where, like, when you have a guy who, where there's, he fell one round. All right, well, where do we evaluate that loss in value, if you will? There's some corners coming out next year, although not as, I actually think this year's corner class was a lot deeper.
It is.
Sean Wade out of Ohio. This year's corner class was actually very deep, to be honest. I thought it was uniquely, like, was it Jalen Johnson out of Utah? It was a guy who fell to the Bears. I thought that was an interesting fall for a guy.
I like Surtain out of Alabama for sure.
Yeah.
I like Campbell out of Georgia, just more for like a round 3 or 4 guy, maybe round 2 if he has a good year. Mook out of South Carolina. I call him that because I can't pronounce his full last name. Another guy that a lot of people don't mention a lot, who I think could definitely be, if he really balls out and has like a good pro day and combine, I think Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech could really creep into the like 2nd round, 1st round.
Yeah, it's always fun looking at these classes ahead of time, because you're getting like an idea of, okay, like who might come out, who's going to be like the, so like we already talked about 2 quarterbacks, right? Who is the sleeper candidate to pop up? Like, like I heard some people talking about Jamie Newman, who's a transfer from Wake Forest, who's going to Georgia. Like, that's one of the guys that people are talking about. Shocking that it's a transfer that people are talking about already so ahead of time. Maybe because of the Kyler Murray 1-year effect, and not only that, you get to see him at Wake Forest. But it is weird that like now he's getting a little bit of it. Trey Lance at North Dakota State is getting a little bit of rumblings. I think that might be the Carson Wentz effect, if you will.
Mine is actually neither of those. And it all depends on if he continues to improve about how well he played last year and actually declares. But mine is Brock Purdy out of Iowa State.
He was another one I heard recently, yeah.
He's a very natural thrower of the ball, very cerebral. Imagine if like let's say you're like doing Madden ratings and you have Jake Fromm and you give him more physical traits with like throwing tight spirals and throwing downfield, but you take away a little bit of his cerebral traits, but not much. And he's bigger than Fromm too. I like Brock Purdy a lot. Maybe like a late first round, early second round guy. I don't think he's not a guy you could start right away. You definitely need to sit him a year or two so he could learn the speed of the game. But
Gotcha.
He's definitely a dark horse, like creep up on you candidate, because he doesn't have the greatest talent around him, but still has to perform against top talent, and he performs pretty well.
Are there any guys that we haven't mentioned so far that you're interested in talking about?
Let me just run through my list of names real quick. Sorry.
Because there's like some guys who look like they're potentially going to be blue chippers, right? Like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, people are already saying like top 5 of the draft next year, maybe top 2 back to back. Jamar Chase, Penny Sewell. You mentioned who's the damn well, somebody who I mentioned before is Marvin Wilson out of FSU.
Yeah, I like Wilson a lot. Him and Ray. I think. Well, you got to remember too, guys like Lawrence has been talked about since he was a freshman, and he was a 5-star recruit. And then Justin Fields, as a senior in high school, was on Netflix. On that show QB1. So he's been in the spotlight for a long time. But
yeah, it's funny. It does feel like we're going to be losing the last of those stars that we've been talking about for years. Like it was weird because I felt like it didn't seem like it was like that for a bit. And then like the last 3 or 4 years, it felt like there was like every year people were talking about guys who were eventually coming out. Whether it was like Sam Darnold, I remember the scam for Sam, or tank for Sam. Then there was tank for Tua, tank for Trevor. Like every couple of years, it's like another set of quarterbacks like teams are just tanking for.
Well, okay, so all right, well, let's do it this way. Last year, Jalen Hurts was going into his senior year. Granted, he traveled from Alabama or transferred from Alabama to Oklahoma, but a lot of people knew he was athletic and knew he was big and strong, but they didn't really see him as an NFL talent. And then we see him as like a round 5 or 6 guy. And then we see him as a round 3 guy. And then he has a good combine, good interviews. It's like we see this guy as an early round 3, possible round 2 guy. Do you see like that same type of ascension for like Sam Ehlinger out of Texas? Do you think he could do that?
Is he transferring? Or is he moving anywhere? Is it
No, he's just coming into his senior year. But a lot of people like the kid. He's big, he's strong, he's he can run, but I just don't think he's that great of a thrower.
I feel like every year, though, we do get those guys who come on late. And it's never the guy who you think, right? Nobody thought Joe Burrow was going to be the guy who came on. People talked about Baker Mayfield, but nobody really thought Baker Mayfield was going to go number 1 overall. Last year, it was Dwayne Haskins, Daniel Jones. Those guys nobody was talking about in the first round the year before. So
nobody was talking about Daniel Jones until the pro day.
Yeah. Well, Senior Bowl. Because that's where he shined.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry. That's what I meant. Was the Senior Bowl.
That's when Dave Gettleman fell in love and had to give Danny his ring. Honestly, I think I'm a little bit more impressed with what Dave Gettleman did. I think it might have been a little bit more Joe Judge influence as well this year.
Oh yeah, coming from the Patriots system, trying to do a Patriots draft.
But it's very hard pegging guys at this stage because you're like, you saw like a hint here, a hint there. The thing that I'm curious about is now we're talking about all these guys. There's always a faller too, right? Like people like Delpit, right? Everybody thought Delpit was going to be a top 10 guy last year at this time of year, and then he kind of falls off. Who's another one? Trey. Is it Trey Smith? Trey Adams? Trey Adams out of Washington. Everybody saw him as a first rounder, potential first rounder. Maybe he recoups his value this year after spending all last year out on injury. There's guys who might fall a little bit out of these guys. Like, again, this is why coming out at the right time. We said it before. Guys got injured. They went back for their senior year. Like Najee Harris is the one that I feel like is going to be the Bryce Love of this story, right? Like he's got you could have came out this year. You would have maybe been a day 2 pick, maybe day 3, but you would have made your money and you would have went to a team and you've been getting paid.
But I'd also put that same superlative on Jalen Waddle, also out of Alabama, because it was like, like Tua was getting the receivers these balls last year, and they're probably going to like return to a more run heavy, not pass as much type of team. And I'm not saying Waddle will fall to like round 3, round 4, but the more conservative you get, it's going to be really hard to have 2 receivers stand out. And I think between him and Devonta Smith, he's going to be the one that's going to fall down draft boards a little bit more, personally speaking.
I get that. When you don't have the ability to feed everybody. I mean, we saw Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley do Calvin Ridley. When Calvin Ridley came out, he still had I think he came out, no, right, Tua had just I think it was just that game, the bowl game.
Yeah.
So,
but he was wide receiver 1 for at least a year.
But yeah, you might not be able to split between the 2 guys. Any last thoughts on 2021 as far as rise or fall or strength of that draft class?
I think it's strength. Like, I don't think it's as good as the draft class we just had, because this one was, I mean, on paper, it was a good draft class.
Yeah.
You can never really grade a draft class until they actually perform. But on paper, it was a very good draft class. I think this one would be, like a little bit below it, but I think it's still going to be good. But it's just like, it happens every year. Every year, random people are just going to have a good season from a team you didn't expect to be good or as good as they were. And then once the bowl games come around, you're going to have somebody show out in a bowl game or in the college football playoff. Like Patrick Queen wasn't considered a round 1 pick until the college football playoff.
That's true. That was actually one of those late guys, like really late in the process that nobody was paying attention to. That it wasn't until he kind of blew up at the end.
Same thing with Isaiah Simmons. Like everybody knew Simmons was good, but not this freak athlete that like X weapon that every team needed to have until the playoff came. And then you're going to have the Senior Bowl where other people come up out of nowhere. And then you're going to have the Combine where there's going to be some offensive tackle who's 6'7", 390 pounds, but runs a 4.8. And it's like, well, this guy's a first-round pick, no doubt. And it happens every year. Or there's going to be somebody that gets arrested for, getting in a fight with their girlfriend or something. When they could have gone in round 2, they're going to go on round 6. Just things like that.
Or there's a picture of them that gets released on draft night with them smoking a bong.
Or they get a 7 on their Wonderlic test and everyone thinks you're retarded.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. It's nice, though, that the draft's over. We finally get to see some of these guys, hopefully, in action. And I can't wait till next year, man. But I'm looking forward to the football season, like the real football season, hopefully.
Man, if there's no college football this year, that's really not good for me. But, yeah. I'm going to stay optimistic and hope that there's football, because it's like you can attest to this. I think most people can attest to this. Like, there's nothing almost as enjoyable as just after a week of work or whatever issues you have, like whether it be in a relationship, family, your work life, finances, whatever it is, that one Saturday or Sunday, or maybe both if you're just that big of a football fan. It's like when we're sitting there watching football or checking our fantasy team, if you have one, that's like everything else in the world does not exist for those 4 quarters. And it's just so there's nothing
of fantasy, dude, how this draft and free agency affects fantasy for last year is going to be fantastic. That's going to be the fun part. Just deciphering where all those guys all land. And because Jonathan, okay, you're in a, this is a little bit off topic, but you're doing maybe you don't do dynasty, but say even who's your favorite rookie outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire next year? Because it's clearly got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he's with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to be utilized as a pass-catching weapon, but outside of him, Jonathan Taylor, but then you're worrying about Marlon Mack. Is it going to be a committee? J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah, Dobbins, for sure. Dobbins or Taylor?
Yeah, it's got to be one of those guys.
Baltimore, they were the number 1 rushing team last year in terms of attempt and yards. And
yeah, but my question
isn't getting any younger.
Yeah, but that was my thing. My question is, it might be they start out splitting reps for, J.K. Dobbins with Mark Ingram. Now, there's not a guy who's equally as young, so you're right. The age thing is what probably puts Dobbins over the head, over Ingram. They did lose some, offensive linemen.
Right. They also got good offensive linemen in the draft.
Yeah.
I would not be mad picking up a Zach Moss late on in the draft, And that's the other thing too. When we're talking about if I'm picking my fantasy team now, it's so much but after preseason, if we have one, or theoretically, if we had a regular football season, preseason and training camp tells you kind of a lot about how these rookie running backs are going to be used. Wide receivers are a little bit safer to pick than running back, but unless you know this person's coming into a number 1 running back position, it's not really safe. Or even if they are coming into a number 1 running back position, if it's a bad offense, I don't like running backs on bad offenses. Sometimes you get a gem, but sometimes it's that's a bad offense for a reason.
Yeah.
No matter how good this player is.
But yeah, it was just some food for thought. Maybe I'll do an episode on that. I'll have you on for that one because that sounds like just such a fantasy. That's the fantasy is that fantasy will happen again. That's what I miss so much is fantasy.
Yeah,
that's that's my love.
Since we're on the topic of fantasy, one little note. I actually got this update on my phone today. Is if you play fantasy on ESPN, and I'm sure the other platforms will follow suit. Most likely. Taysom Hill can now be drafted as a tight end or a flex option.
Oh wow! For the 6 catches that he gets in a game.
Yeah, and his 2 rushes and 1 pass attempt.
Don't even get me started on the Sean Payton smoke screens that he does. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'm just going to lead you out on it, and then I'll edit it out. But so anyway, thanks for coming back on, man. It was great having you on. We'll have you back on again.
For sure.
And it's been Shane. It's if you want to follow him, you can follow him at THEE_Shane_MCM.
Correct. On Instagram and Twitter.
Please follow, subscribe. You can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. And Punch, a delicious drink you drink on a summer day.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. I'm about to pass. I'm about to puke.